This is a strange world. I don't know how we got to this point where we're considering unionizing college athletes. There's obviously a lot of it creates a lot of problems. Mrs. Bodensteiner, is that right? It is likely that the terms of a collective bargaining agreement between a school and a union representing student athletes would be inconsistent with the NCAA rules. For example, players could bargain for higher stipends or fewer classes to remain eligible to participate in collegiate sports. The university would be put in a bind of whether to bargain over subjects that could result in exclusion from the NCAA competition. What do you think that the schools should do in such a situation?
I think for some subjects of bargaining, absolutely. They could be in conflict. Let's say the topic is Sundays off, and your conference has, or the NCAA tournament has Sunday games. So I think there could be situations where there may have to be a collective decision made between the employees and the employer to say, we can do that, but we wouldn't be able to participate, and let's come to some compromise. I think there would be many conflicts, not all. Some things would be, maybe more gloves, as my softball pitcher who I brought with me today. Provision of equipment and those sort of things would not, but certainly many topics would be also the subject of conference and NCAA rules.
I also understand that most of the programs and most universities don't generate profits for their athletic programs, which is in keeping with what it was intended to be from the beginning. That it's about academic performance, academic achievement, athletic achievement, not necessarily selling ads and selling tickets. So can you discuss how how this might financially impact universities?
Yeah, none of our 21 sports generates a profit. A few generate revenue. We don't sell tickets to anything other than 2 sports. And so, as I mentioned earlier, I think just the costs of having a student-athlete workforce, we currently have 480 student-athletes at St. Joe's, and just the infrastructure of, the human resources, the bargaining personnel to manage potentially 21 bargaining units and 480 employees would be extensive. Costs that I think decision number one would be, okay, if there are wages now involved, again, at institutions like mine, what does that do to the financial aid? I think that's where the money would have to come from. And so I worry that the access to to college would be decreased at some institutions. And
the vast majority of universities that participate in, collegiate sports are not private universities. These are public institutions or parochial, religiously affiliated institutions. As I understand it, they would not be covered. Does that create a competitive disadvantage?
That's the difference with Columbia and teaching assistants, is they're not competing. And then when you look at the pros, it's one giant bargaining, it's one group of players. So yes, just take the Atlantic 10 conference. There are 15 members, 4 publics and several religiously affiliated. So that's who we're competing against. And so when you try and compete for, coaches and athletic trainers and student athletes, some who would be intrigued by the union, some who wouldn't want a piece of it, the competition is what really makes this different. And the fact that inherently only a portion of the Atlantic 10 could be unionized makes it very difficult.
Thank you, Mrs. Bodensteiner. Professor Mitten, in professional sports, baseball, MLB, the NBA, these athletes are judged by their performance on the field, and they can be cut for poor performance. In contrast, many student athletes, including those who receive scholarships, cannot lose their scholarships or would be kicked out of school if they do not play well. As employees, would this change the dynamic? Would student athletes be subject to the same job performance standards as professional athletes?
Well, I think it's very likely that they could. You're exactly right in that, scholarships can be awarded multi-years, 4 or 5 years at the Division I level, and a coach cannot take away someone's scholarship.
And then I quickly have just a little bit of time, and I want to get this question because I think it's important to our country, and that is, what is the impact that this is going to have on our Olympic teams? many of the athletes on our Olympic Games who are not paid, they're amateur athletes. Many of them are college athletes. How would this impact America's ability to have unpaid athletes?
Gentleman's time has expired.